everybody. I'm going to start a multi-part series on an issue which we seem to keep coming back to in dealing with a lot of atheists on YouTube. I'm going to read through a chapter from a book called The Reason for God by Dr. Tim Keller. Tim Keller is the pastor of Redeemer Presbyterian Church in New York City. He's one of the larger churches in the Northeast in our denomination, the Presbyterian Church in America. And he's just written a really wonderful book here that we've been using with our older youth in our church. Between the ages of 17 and 25, we've been doing a special get-together with them every month. And the pastor has been going through chapters from this book, and I just thought this was a wonderful chapter, and I wanted to read through it and kind of clarify a few things as we go along, because I think he really deals with this subject from an apologetical standpoint really well, and he really goes after this notion from Richard Dawkins, especially being the modern atheistic guru out there, really to the existence of God and to the claims that the scriptures make. So I'm going to go over here of chapter 6 from his book, entitled Science Has Disproved Christianity. Before I start to read, I do want to read and have you keep this in mind as I'm going here in regards to an unbeliever, and in this regard an atheist, from Romans chapter 1 starting in verse 18. I've used these verses before, but I want you to keep these in mind. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Because that which is known about God is evident within them, for God made it evident to them. For since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes, His eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. And I'll start with this chapter now. He starts with a couple of quotations. I think these come from some people who are actually coming to his church. First one says, quote, "My scientific training makes it difficult, if not impossible, to accept the teachings of Christianity, said Thomas, a young Asian medical resident. As a believer in evolution, I can't accept the Bible's pre-scientific accounts of the origin of life." And the second quote, "And the Bible is filled with accounts of miracles," added Michelle, a med student. "They simply could not have happened." So he begins. The best-selling books by Richard Dawkins, Daniel C. Dennett, and Sam Harris assume that science in general, and evolutionary science in particular, has made belief in God unnecessary and obsolete. Dawkins said very famously that, quote, "Although atheism might have been logically tenable before Darwin, Darwin made it possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist," unquote. In The God Delusion, he goes much further. He argues that you cannot be an intelligent scientific thinker and still hold religious beliefs. It is one or the other. So to support his thesis, he points out that a study in 1998 showed that about 7% of American scientists in the National Academy of Sciences believe in a personal God. This is proof that the more intelligent, rational, and scientifically minded you are, the less you will be able to believe in God. Is Dawkins right? Has science essentially disproved Christian beliefs? Must we choose between thinking scientifically and belief in God? Next heading says, aren't miracles scientifically impossible? He goes on. The first reason that many people think science has disproved traditional religion is that most of the major faiths believe in miracles, the intervention of God into the natural order. The miraculous is particularly important for Christian belief. Christians annually celebrate the miracle of the Incarnation, the birth of Jesus, each Christmas, and the miracle of the bodily resurrection of Christ from the dead each Easter. The New Testament is filled with accounts of miracles that Jesus performed during the course of his ministry. Scientific mistrust of the Bible began with the Enlightenment belief that miracles cannot be reconciled to a modern rational view of the world. Armed with this presupposition, scholars turned to the Bible and said, quote, "The biblical accounts can't be reliable because they contain descriptions of miracles, unquote. The premise behind such a claim is, quote, science has proven there is no such thing as miracles, unquote. But embedded in such a statement is a leap of faith. Isn't this interesting? Of course that's a leap of faith. They said biblical accounts can't be reliable because they contain descriptions of miracles. They say it can't be reliable because, not because it contains miracles, but because they don't believe in miracles. That certainly is a leap of faith, isn't it? He goes on. It is one thing to say that science is only equipped to test for natural causes and cannot speak to any others. That's good science. But listen to this next statement. It is quite another to insist that science proves that no other causes could possibly exist. And this is what atheism is doing today. And this is what these scientists who are anti-God or atheist are saying. This is just not good science. John Macquarie writes, quote, science proceeds on the assumption that whatever events occur in the world can be accounted for in terms of other events, just as immanent and this worldly. So, miracle or miracles is irreconcilable with our modern understanding of both science and history, unquote. Macquarie is quite right to assert that when studying a phenomenon, the scientist must always assume there is a natural cause. That is because natural causes are the only kind its methodology can address. It is another thing to insist that science has proven there can't be any other kind. That's just ridiculous. There would be no experimental model, for testing the statement. Quote, no supernatural cause for any natural phenomenon is possible, unquote. It is therefore a philosophical presupposition and not a scientific finding. Macquarie's argument is ultimately circular. Isn't that interesting? Because I get accused of circular reasoning all the time. Well, here's circular reasoning right here. He says that science, by its nature, can't discern or test for supernatural causes, and therefore those causes can't exist. That's an unscientific statement. It's not only just unscientific, it's ridiculous. The philosopher Alvin Plantinga responds, and he says, and I think this is just a great illustration. Macquarie perhaps means to suggest that the very practice of science requires that one reject the idea of God raising someone from the dead. This argument is like the drunk who insisted on looking for his lost car keys only under the streetlight on the grounds that the light was better there. In fact, it would go the drunk one better. It would insist that because the keys would be hard to find in the dark, they must be under the light. This is exactly what an atheist or an atheistic scientist is saying by saying that that supernatural cannot exist and that God does not exist because it's not scientifically possible or they can't prove it scientifically. It's ridiculous. And not only is it bad science, but it's scientism, which is a very popular thing in our culture these days. It's a belief that science is this ultimate thing that we have that can define all of life. Well, it can't. It's very useful, and science is very important. But it is not going to prove or disprove the existence of God or the claims of the Scriptures and the truths that we know from the Scriptures. So I'm going to continue in the second part by going on with a little bit with this notion of the miracles and how can they have been true, and then we're going to go on to talk about is science actually in conflict with Christianity. So I'm going to leave it at that for now, and I'll see you in the next part. Thanks.